as we continue this series called Animated, what we're doing is we're looking at famous animated films and trying to see how do we pull messages out of them to apply to our life with God. And it's very important that we do this. And the reason behind it, kind of the rationale behind it, is that we want to be people that exegete culture. And what we mean by that is that we want to be able to look at signs and symbols and messages and to be able to understand them and seek to understand them in light of Jesus. And so it's very important that we understand all around us. You get preached to 250 to 300 times a day via advertisements, all these messages, and how do we interpret these messages? How do we view them in light of the gospel? And families to our children, what do we interpret with what Madison Avenue and Hollywood says? How do we bring that in and say, no, here's what we learn from this, here's what we don't learn from this? So that's why we're doing animated films, just have that appeal. You know, what is it about certain ones that you can watch with every member from the youngest to the oldest in your family? And it's just good, right? So this week we're looking at Up. Next week we'll be looking at How to Train Your Dragon. Is that a good one? I haven't seen it yet. Good, we get 2 thumbs up-ish, kind of, yeah? Okay, we got lots of thumbs up. I've never trained a dragon before, so I'm interested in learning how to train a dragon. I recently trained a liger, but that's a whole other story. Not quite as hard as training a dragon, so hopefully you'll come back and join us, and we'll be able to see what can we learn from these films. Because the poets and writers and actors and rappers, they tend to be a prophetic voice today, and so whether we like it or not, we need to try to find ways that we can understand it and better communicate that. And so this week is Pentecost Sunday. That's a term that churches use for thousands of years. It talks about it's 50 days since Easter, and that's when the Holy Spirit came upon the believers in Acts, and it started the launch of the church. That the church was really birthed through the life of Jesus, but it was animated at Pentecost. And then this movement spread from the far corners of the east to the west, and to now we see it here. We're in an old gym in South Lake with a very well-working AC here. It's cold. You know why it's cold in here? Because I sweat like a pig. It's horrible. Like the whole first 3 rows would be like the Shamu splash zone if we didn't keep it so cold like a meat locker here. So if you just came from the butcher shop and you want to hang your meat, feel free. We offer that here. Whitechapel, just right around the corridor, and you'll be good to go. And so this movement of the church has spread, and it's this day that we remember that. And so as we think about this week with this film Up, what we're going to look at is what does it mean to be open to new experiences? Many of us have been walking with God for some time now, and many of us long for a fresh experience, a fresh encounter. And what can we learn from this film and apply to the life of Christ and the life of us in response to that? And so what we'll do is we'll look at a couple of metaphors that Jesus uses. You know, Jesus was the master metaphor, right? I mean, he would take things, he would be walking and teaching at the same time, and he would take a fish and loaves and then have a message about it, or he would take a fig tree, and he was constantly analyzing the signs and symbols around him. And so that's what we're attempting to do today. So to get in the spirit of Up, I got some pictures of some of my favorite metaphors and scenes that happened throughout the movie just to frame us. And so the first one is the adventure book. And many of you know, you've seen this. And does anyone have an adventure book, by the way? Anyone? Or like, I think another film called it a bucket list. You got a bucket list, right? We got some of those. I don't plan on dying soon, but I still want to have things, and it's this idea that's behind this adventure to get to Paradise Falls that really frames a desire for new, for uncharted territory, and it's the adventure book. And then tied to the adventure book, I call it the penny jar. I think there's more than coins in there, and they're saving up money to get to Paradise Falls. Does anyone still save their coins today? Right? I do. I have a Diet Dr. Pepper problem, and so I just always feed the addiction right there to there. And you know what messed everything up was when the phones, those, you know, kids, I know you don't know these, but you used to have to put money into a phone to make a call. And when they changed from 25 to 35 cents, that messed up everything, all right? I mean, stock went up in the dime, didn't it? Now, the next image, this is a picture of new and this adventure that's about to take place. And the balloons on the house that's taking it up. And I was always wondering, in light of the first scene that we saw, he was having a hard time getting down the stairs and cracked and all that. How did he get the balloons up there? I mean, that's a lot of balloons, right? I mean, I was wondering, did he hire a contractor? Oh, well, Pixar won't let us know. And so that's this image that we see. Now, children, if you go home today and put balloons on your house, it's not going to go over well with your parents. So just want you to know, and it's probably not going to float. And so that's this image of fulfilling a dream. And then there are some companions along the way, and so we're introduced to probably my favorite character. I mean, just look at that. And so here we see that there's a figure that's characterized as old as this normal way, and when we use the word in compare and contrast old and new today, we're not talking about age, we're talking about a mindset. And then this unexpected guest lands up on the house as the house is floating away, changing everything, changing the course of the adventure. And last but not least, to get up, you have to understand the cone of shame. And so here we see that the cone of shame is a big part of up. I do not like the cone of shame either. I didn't exactly grow up with pets, as many of you know, so I thought this was like a fashion piece. So I didn't know if this is like Dolce & Gabbana cone or what's happening here, but I finally learned the meaning of what it was. And so I've told my friends if I start biting myself or anything like that to put me in a cone of shame, but there's probably other options to put me in. So that's some of the stuff that frames this idea behind the movie. And we learn so much. There's so much. I mean, that opening scene where you see husband and wife going through their journey, then instantly it turns into doom and gloom. I mean, I'm not a crier, but I was crying during that time. And you see this journey of being open to a new experience. You see, we're very attracted to new, if you think about it. Something about fresh and new really, really resonates with us. And marketers, they know this very, very, very well. I mean, let's just think about Tide for a second. How many new and improved versions of Tide can they come out with? Right? I mean, at the end of the day, Tide is Tide, right? I don't know if there's a chemical. I mean, every new version, it's new and improved. Or technology. Oh, my word, don't even get me started. So let's say there was a company that put out a device, and they put out this device, and everybody rushed to go get it. And you get the device, and then you find out later that there's a new device. And this new device, not only does it have a camera on the back, it's got a camera on the front. And so then you feel like your device is outdated, so then you have to go and get the new device with the camera on the front. Who uses a camera on the front? I mean, if you look, you have like the double, triple chin. It doesn't work. There's not a good angle. It's just not happening. But I know a guy, I mean, and he would go stand in line for these new devices. I mean, I'm just like, what are you thinking, man? And even if let's say your contract wasn't up, and then you have to pay full retail for the new device because it's new. We're drawn to new. We like new. New changes things up. New, it kind of gets us out of the mundane and the ordinary. And my fear is that for many of us, we really resonate with the video clip that we showed, and that we are living mundane, boring lives. We don't have an adventure book. We don't have a sense of excitement. That really, it's boring. It's not refreshed. It's stale. And it's really evident and seen in our life with God. That we're used to routine, and we're used to ritual, and it's just the way we've always done it, and this is how we do it. And so my hope for today is that you and I would be able to experience a newness in our relationship with God, that we would be able to experience and tap into that new life that's found in Christ. And I'm going to challenge us to look and see what does that mean for us. And then I'm going to challenge us as a church, what does it mean for us to be the church and to operate in newness, to be able to walk into this new life that Christ has promised for us. And so as we look forward, we're going to look at the teachings of Jesus, and I want to keep something in tension, is that when we talk about new and a new encounter, we have to hold in tension tradition. That tradition is to be honored and to be built upon and to be kept. It's a part of our framework, and we have to keep these in tension with new and what's happening. And so we're going to be going back and forth between those ideas, and so it's just a balance as we try to figure this out to keep those in tension. When Jesus came on the scene, he was talking a lot about a new thing. He was talking about what it meant to live in the rule and the reign of God in the here and now based on his arrival. And this wasn't exactly a popular message, so to speak. It wasn't something that people just instantly embraced without challenging. In fact, the people that were closest to the movement often doubted. Those on the fringe were often upset. And he came and he was bringing this new message. And that leads us to our story today where he uses some metaphors. So in Matthew chapter 9, 14 through 17, here Jesus is talking about this, and he's just got done. They're kind of in the middle of feasting. They're in the middle of partying. Jesus here is with some ragtag JV Fisher boys, and they're known as the rebels and the partiers and the ones who they're not religious at all. So let's read what we see here in Matthew 9, 14 through 17. Then the disciples of John, now this is another subset of Jesus' disciples, they came to him saying, "Why do we and the Pharisees were the religious leaders of the day. Some you could translate, these were the preachers, ironic. And the Pharisees, they fast often, but your disciples do not fast." Fasting was a Jewish tradition. It was a spiritual practice. It was done in remembrance, in observance. And in this context, it would be abstaining from food. And so some traditional Jewish folks would fast twice a week. They would go through extended periods of fasting, and this was part. And so it was a discipline they practiced. Some of you practice this today. You might fast from food, or maybe you fast from technology, or fast from Facebook, or whatever. During Lent, we normally fast from something for 40 days. Funny story, Mike and I were first really introduced to this concept in college, and so we wanted to be like super spiritual Billy, over here. And so we decided, we're like, all right, we're going to go on a fast. Okay, like, cool, we're going to fast. And I don't really remember the reason behind it. It probably had to do with a girl or something, probably, right? And, we were fasting, and this was 3 hours into it. And we weren't exactly accustomed to missing meals, okay? And so 3 hours into it, we meet up in the dorm. And I remember it like it was yesterday. And there's bunk beds, and we were in there, and we're talking. And I was like, all right, bro, how's it going? And I expected Micah to be the strong spiritual leader out of the two of us. And he goes, man, I don't know why they call it a fast. There ain't nothing fast about it. I was like, all right, let's go eat. So that's just a little backstory. What were we talking about? And, there we go, and. So Jesus said to them, now Jesus answers the question. Now, again, we're talking about the master of metaphor, right? He's constantly painting images and pictures, and he uses a wedding analogy. The wedding guests cannot mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them, can they? The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast. Next slide. He goes to another image and says, no one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth. Why is sew spelled like that? Have you ever wondered? It should be S-O-W-S, right? Okay, that's just me. All right, no one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old cloak, for the patch pulls away from the cloak, and a worse tear is made. Analogy number 3. Neither is new wine put into old wineskins. Otherwise, the skins burst, and the wine is spilled, and the skins are destroyed. But new wine is put into fresh wineskins, and so both are preserved. If you're anything like me when you read this passage, you come to mind and go, what is happening here? They ask Jesus a question, and he responds with wedding imagery, with talking about clothes, and talking about wine. Interesting. What is he trying to do here? What's happening? The backstory is that the disciples of John were in a period of mourning. They were sad, they were upset, because John had just been captured. John's whole role was to come and pave the way for Jesus. And so John came on the scene, and he was blazing trails for the Messiah, and he said, this Jesus is about to come. And actually, John started getting a following. He says, no, it's not me. There's one that's coming who's greater than me. In fact, I can't even carry his sandals. So John disappears into the movement, ends up getting arrested, leading to death, and we're in between that time where his disciples are fasting because of mourning. And so these religious folks that are following John, these Pharisees, they see Jesus who's come along the scene with this rowdy group of disciples who are partying, drinking wine, and enjoying life. They're feasting, and they're saying, why aren't you fasting like we are? Instead, you're feasting. And that frames the problem. So Jesus sees, once again, that the issue is a lot bigger than what's on the appearance, and that's normally how it is in life, right? There's always something below. And so he's trying to use the analogy of a wedding guest, and he's saying that at the wedding, and weddings in Jewish culture were about a week long, they're saying you wouldn't fast and mourn and be solemn at a wedding. I mean, when we think about weddings, we don't exactly do that, right? Imagine if everyone at the royal wedding had been fasting and they had this sad look on their face. I mean, poor bride and groom, they'd be up front going, wow, we're not really getting exactly the response we were looking for. Big gulps. All right, let's go the honeymoon. And so he paints that picture and says, no. There's a time when the bridegroom will leave, and then fasting will be appropriate. And then he instantly goes into the next analogy, saying it's like a garment. And if you were to, back in the day when we used to sew up our jeans, unlike certain worship leaders around here, you would have to put, you'll get it after the sermon when you see. And he says there is holy pants. And you would have to put a piece of cloth and you sew it in, S-O-W. He says, now, after the garment's already old, when you try to put the new piece of cloth in, it doesn't fit right. It's not right. And then he goes to the wineskins, and they didn't exactly have wine glasses in first century Palestine back then. And so they would put wine into wineskins. And they would take a fresh wineskin, which is normally from an animal, and they would pour the wine in, and due to the wine expanding, it would expand the wineskin. And it would reach a certain stage. And then he said, you wouldn't put new wine back into it because it would burst, it would rip, it would tear, it wouldn't work. And so what Jesus is trying to communicate to them is that with my arrival, me coming on the scene, I'm bringing in something totally new. I came to fulfill the law and the prophets. It was based on law, it was based on sacrifice, it was based on rule keeping, it was based on religion and ritual. And I've come to change it to relationship. And so what God was attempting to do for his people through the patriarchs and Noah and Abraham, Moses, through the law, through the prophets, through the judges, I am now fulfilling through Jesus. And now what used to be about rules and sacrifice, I'm making a whole new shift, and it's about relationship. And while that doesn't strike us as that different, but to a first century Jewish listener, observer, this was radically different. This was the message that would eventually lead to his crucifixion. So he comes to bring a new perspective, a new way of seeing life with God, a new way of relating to God. So let's just pause for a second. How much time or how much energy do we spend in this old type of framework where we have it in our heads that life with God is about rule keeping and ritual and sacrifice, and that God is this distant God far off, and that he possibly couldn't and wouldn't or shouldn't hear our prayers or want to connect with us or want to speak to us, or let alone use us, or we're not worthy, we've messed up too bad, we've failed too many times. But Jesus is offering a whole new paradigm. He's saying, it's not about you at all. It's about me. And I'm changing the way you relate to God. And it's based on relationship. This belief that God doesn't love us as we should be, because none of us are as we should be, right? And so changed the whole thing from law to grace. And he came and fulfilled it. And so how often does this impact our understanding? Are we open to life with God not necessarily being based on our performance? Are we accepted by God based on our performance or based on the performance of Christ? And these might seem like ethereal issues, but at the core of how we view God, these are big issues. And so life with Christ was radically changed by what he did and made it new. And so how does this impact us? How do we position ourselves for a fresh understanding of this? I love the way it's phrased in Isaiah 43. And here in Isaiah, the Israelite people, they were in Babylonian captivity, which never really ends up well, okay? And they've been constantly wandering, constantly straying, constantly wondering where God was in the midst of everything. And here in Isaiah 43, 18 and 19, from the Message translation, check out the way that they phrase this. God speaking through Isaiah says, forget about what's happened. Don't keep going over old history. Be alert, be present. I'm about to do something brand new. It's bursting out. Don't you see it? There it is. I'm making a road through the desert, rivers in the Badlands, that God is about to do something new. And it says, don't keep going over old history. Man, that's something we could really embrace. I don't know about you, but I just have this running in the back of my mind, all the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, and shouldn't have, and why'd you do that, and those Homer Simpson dope moments. I mean, that just happens, right? And he says, no, I'm about to do something new. If you could ask God to do one thing new in your heart, in your life today, what would it be? Or if you could ask God to do something new in the life of your family, what would that be? What would you want? Would you believe that it could be possible? Do you believe that a new thing could happen? God is about to do something new. One of the ways that we can really position ourselves to do this is through spiritual formation. And that word in itself is very loaded. But we need to find new ways to encounter God. For those of you, those of us that can't pray upon hours and hours at a time, we need to be okay with an ADD prayer life, right? We need to be okay with not fitting into conventional ways of connecting with God. And could it be that there's new ways? Parents, listen to me on this. I know that it's not in the manual, but did you know that like the Nook and the Kindle and the iPod and Android, Xbox, PlayStation, DS, Wii, did you know they have an off switch? It's crazy. Okay, your kids do not want you to know this, and none of them are going to talk to me anymore. But yeah, they have an off switch. One of the best things you can create for your kids is to create space for them to go unplugged. If you're trying to get them to position themselves to see what's the new thing God is up to, you got to go unplugged. You got to find ways to get rid of the white noise. Kids, listen up to me. White noise will be the single most thing that could keep your generation from hearing the voice of God. Always connected, always on, never quiet. Have you tried to be quiet for 2 minutes lately? Doesn't it feel like 30 years? I mean, it is just like you're quiet, and then there's just turtles that come from the land of Awkwardville all around, and it's just so weird. Try that today. Just be quiet for a little bit and just see what happens. You've got to cultivate an ear to hear from God. Some other ways, maybe, for those of you that really get inspired by nature. Nature is just screaming and yelling the glory of God. Go connect with God and see the beauty that He's created. The other day, I work here. I mean, like my office is here. You know what I mean? I mean, you're like, duh, you work here. But my office is here, and we decided we were going to go to Starbucks. Surprise. And we said, well, what if we walk to Starbucks? We're like, what? like walk? Yeah, like step in front of another. And so we decided to do this. Very interesting. So we leave and walk by big Jesus, like, hey, Jesus statue, and we go outside. It's big, by the way. It's awesome. And we see this like crosswalk thing. We're like, huh. Okay, push the button to walk across. And it was like, man, we got out of our routine and we walked, and it was to see the community and run into people and like break a little sweat. It's good for us. Get out of the routine. Maybe what this message of newness is saying for some of us in our life with God is it's time to mix things up. It's time to get out of the box, get out of your routines, get out of what's rote, and try something new, okay? And so it's very important that we understand the new life that's found in Christ. Things are changed. It's a whole new ballgame now. But this also makes us ask questions about the church. In light of celebrating Pentecost and remembering Pentecost, it's crucial that we ask questions as a church. And I'm coming with some assumptions when I talk about the church. I'm talking about us as the local body of the big capital C church. And my reflections and my ideas are really centered around the North American church. But specifically for us in this place, how do we as a church have a constant ear and a constant heart that's bent towards what God is up to, what God is doing? How do we stay fresh as a church? How do we honor tradition? How do we remember like the sacrifices that were paid for this specific place? How do we remember those that have given their blood, their sweat, and their tears to build this place and provide a place where we can come together? And then how do we go? We honor that, we stand on that, but we've got to keep going. We've got to keep being future-oriented. We've got to change. We've got to try things that no one's trying, to reach people that no one's reaching. We've got to keep going. We've got to say, how do we create a church for our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren? How do we reach out and morph the church into a digital age where people are hyper-connected and we got to reach? There's this whole like generation that could possibly miss the story of Christ. And so how do we position ourselves? How do we bring that about in a new way? Because here's the news. There's no backup plan apart from the church. The local church is the hope of the world. And so how do we take this idea of newness and go, here's what we're going to do. We've got to reinvent ourselves. We've got to morph. We've got to be able to go and to blaze into new territory while we honor tradition and learn from it and stand on its shoulders. And with that, we need to understand that I'm not the only minister in here. That we are all ministers. We all have a ministry. We all have a calling. It just so happens I'm on a stage. And so, honestly, I'd rather be sitting there, a lot less stressful. I wouldn't sweat as much. And we have a ministry. And so you have a ministry. Do you understand that? You have been called and equipped. The people around you, it's no accident they're around you. You've got things inside of you, visions and dreams, stuff birthed inside of you that we all need to know about. Regardless if you're 5 or 15 or 50, you're a minister, and the future of this movement depends on us. And so how will we be awake and aware of the new thing that God is doing? And so a challenge on 2 levels for us individually: to embrace a new life that Christ has offered for us, to forget about the past, to forget about the old way, and to forget that we don't measure up anymore, because you're never going to measure up. But because of Christ, we do. And then as a church, how do we embrace the new thing? And so as I wrap it up, I want to leave you with an analogy that really helps me flesh out this passage, this idea, and it's the song. You all have favorite songs, songs that you play on repeat, songs that you listen to at different seasons of life. What if we viewed life with God and our role in the church as a song? And so maybe the message would be for us today is you need to find your song. What's your song or your soundtrack? Maybe today you need a new song. You've been singing a song of despair and gloom and doubt and fear. And today, could it possibly be that to embrace the newness that's found in Christ, you could sing a new song? And this really makes sense if you think about it. Because when I'm embracing and walking in this newness of Christ, there's a musical term called resonance. And it resonates. It's in harmony. It feels right. But when I'm not, there's another term called dissonance. And whenever you've heard that moment where 2 notes shouldn't be together and you hear that tension, that's dissonance. And so are you resonating with God, or is there dissonance with God? And then what happens is that when a group of people get together to sing their song, it creates this beautiful experience. In Psalm, we see that the psalmist lays it out like this. It's going to come up on the screen. I love the way the Message translation puts it. And the psalmist is writing here, and the author's a musical. These are really meant to be sung. And he says, I waited and waited and waited for God. Some translations say, I waited patiently for the Lord. At last he looked. Finally he listened. He lifted me out of the ditch, pulled me from deep mud. He stood me up on a solid rock to make sure I wouldn't slip. He taught me how to sing the latest God song. Some translations read, he put a new song in my lips. A praise song to our God. More and more people are seeing this. They enter the mystery, abandoning themselves to God. Maybe we need a new song to sing. And when this happens, when you and I gather, our songs come together, and we create this resonance. we create these overtones that scream out to the community. Look what it says, that more and more people are seeing this, and they enter in the mystery, abandoning themselves to God. Isn't that really what our adventure book should be all about? That we gather together and we find our song and we go and we sing it so that more and more people can find God. And so this week, may you find new ways to connect with God. May you be given a new song. Maybe you need to get your song back. Life has a way of taking our song from us. And may you sing it, and God will put a new song in your heart.